these more than 100 days. All the arguments, wealthy states versus poor states, free states versus slave states, large states versus small states, northward states versus southward states. I saw this union crumbling before it could take form. But, and I will tell you, a tear glistened in Dr. Franklin's eye. He went on, I will tell you, General, today we have signed this Constitution, and I have the great happiness to know that it is a rising sun on America, and not a setting one. I tell you this because you may have problems in your day and time. You must remember we have always had problems since the very beginning of this country. But we as Americans can overcome absolutely any obstacle, any adversary, as long as we, as I have writ, and as you may read, as long as we set aside faction and division, and dare I say political party. We have a short time left, and I would be most pleased. Gentlemen, would you join me? If any of you have any questions for any of the three of us, we will try to solve your curiosities or conundrum. If you're afraid to ask the first question, we would be pleased to take the second question first. Anyone? You won't have this opportunity very often.
Perhaps English is not
Madam.
Mr. Madison, you co-authored essays about the Constitution with Mr. Hamilton. You wrote some, he wrote some. What disillusioned you about Mr. Hamilton?
Cutting right to the core of things.
Essentially, when Mr. Hamilton and I worked together to bring about the Annapolis Convention in 1786, and then when that did not succeed as well as we had hoped, to call the second convention in Philadelphia in 87, we were working assiduously in order to create a national government, such as the Articles of Confederation, but a national government with the energy and the authority to carry out the national functions that the national government required, that all states, even as the Confederation, required national results. In so doing, we helped bring about the convention. Mr. Hamilton was not at the convention as long as many people think. He was not there that long. And so in terms of the negotiations and the debates in bringing about the Constitution, there was a resolution on the 17th of September, and that final document, the report we gave to Congress, was the Constitution. When it became necessary to ratify it, there were nearly 2 to 1 in New York against ratifying the convention. And at that point, Mr. Hamilton and I were still very much conjoined in the object of creating a national government with the energies to carry out national functions. What became clear after those papers were produced, and New York finally resolved to ratify the Constitution in July 1788, Mr. Hamilton's views of the energy requisite and the authority on the national government began to grow in proportions well beyond what I would have anticipated and others would have anticipated. And it was the overextension of authority, overextension of energy in the national government to supplant any authority of the state governments that caused differences between Mr. Hamilton and myself. He produced a report on public credit in January 1790 for a financial program. And on examination, the assumption bill, the banking bill, the funding bill, and the excise bill were all salutary prima facie, but upon examination were contrary to our views of the extent to which the national government might have. And that's where the division of Mr. Hamilton and myself arose. We've never been uncivil. We had never been uncivil to one another. But the agreement that we kind of worked toward, the understanding we had, was divided. And apparently he was much more extensive in his views of national authority than I was willing to permit in national government.
Thank you for cutting right into faction and division, madam.
That's the short answer.